Today, here we have Will Callihan, School Board Attorney for Whiteville City Schools. Thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed for this project.
Certainly.
What would you say is a high-level overview of the role and responsibilities of a school board attorney?
The primary role of the school board attorney is to eliminate the risk and liabilities that the board would run into on a day-to-day basis, from contracts, making sure that contracts are airtight so that we don't create any liability there, to reviewing situations that come up with personnel to make sure that our tenured teachers are protected, to, if there's an accident, making sure that the right people are contacted and that that our insurance people are notified promptly, so that we're able to make sure that all of our personnel, our students, and our administrators are looked after.
All right. How would you describe the working relationship with the superintendent and the Board of Education? How are they the same? How are they different?
It is a wonderful relationship that I have had with the superintendent since I've been the board attorney for Whiteville City Schools. Probably more open communication between myself and Dr. Hager than a lot of the larger systems, just because being in a small town, I'm more accessible to him. It's difficult at times being a full-time attorney that practices both civil and criminal law to be accessible at all times to the school board, but I have had the relationship with Dr. Hager that if he could not get in touch with me because I was in court or for whatever reason, that he knows that he can send me a text message or a call and leave a message at the office. And I've talked to him on nights and weekends, and we've had a wonderful working relationship where he's been able to communicate with me, and anytime I've had any questions, I've in turn been able to communicate with him.
Great. I'm going to ask a follow-up question on that one.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep the understanding between you and Dr. Hager, the superintendent? How do you keep that relationship where he knows that really you're the school board attorney and not the superintendent's attorney?
That's a really good question, and sometimes it's a tough question. There's a tough answer because it's an issue that always comes up where there are issues with the school day to day that Dr. Hager wants advice on. And if it is a situation that may come before the school board at some point in the future, let's just say, for instance, that it's an issue with a teacher where there may be some type of discipline. Ultimately, the school board makes the decision on that through the hearing process. And if that's the case, I try to remove myself and distance myself from that issue so I can act as the school board's representative as opposed to the superintendent's representative. But there are often times with the relationship we have that I answer questions day to day, but I try to prevent there being a conflict in my representation of the system and those things that I should only have the board's interest on. So.
Gotcha. If it's possible to disclose, what kind of legal action have you assisted the Board of Education, the superintendent, or district employees in the past?
There have been two cases that come to mind. The first being the charter school litigation. The charter school litigation was litigation that was created as a result of there being a change in legislation. And that change in legislation allowed the charter schools to be entitled to monies that children had received, or that we had received for children that at one time attended Whiteville City Schools. And as a result, our board, our superintendent, our system was named as the defendant in that lawsuit. All this is public record. And we went through the litigation process with the help of the attorneys from the North Carolina School Board Association. and went through, and we were able to reach a resolution of that matter. The other major litigation issue that has come up, and it's a more common type of litigation, was when we had a student that was injured on our campus, and there was a lawsuit filed again against the school system, and the board named where a child was injured, and we went through, and again we litigated that issue, but it was another matter that was resolved prior to actually having a trial in court.
Gotcha. Are there any current legal issues, not legal issues that's specific to Whiteville City Schools, but are there any current legal issues you see out in the wild that you think will affect policy discussions of the school board?
I do think that there are a couple issues that will likely result in litigation and possibly the changes in legislation, and it will of course affect how we handle our policy here at the Whiteville City School. The tenure issue, where the legislators have effectively done away with tenure over the course of the next 4 years. I foresee there being some litigation at both the state level, likely Court of Appeals, and would not be at all surprised if that issue didn't end up before North Carolina Supreme Court at some time in the future. And of course, any changes in legislation or rulings from the court would have a direct impact on our policies and how we handled the renewal of teachers for either through contracts or through them continuing to maintain their career status. I think that that's probably the most prevalent legal issue that will affect policy in the near future. I foresee that happening probably in the next 12 months.
Gotcha. Yeah, certainly a major issue. What do you consider, and they can be generic, but what do you consider the top 2 or 3 legal threats in the school district?
In our local school district, I have concerns with the ability of the county commissioners and or the legislation, there be legislation to consolidate our system.
Okay.
I feel like that the consolidation of our system would be detrimental to our county just because of the heritage that's there between the city school system and the local residents. The city school system has been able to provide the city school system has been able to provide a local school system for our residents, and the athletics through our local athletic teams, the community is behind them 100%, and I feel like that if either the commissioners or the legislators would make a change to that and consolidate us into one system, I feel like it would have a detrimental impact on our community here locally. The other concern that potential litigation or potential law change that could have some effect on us locally is that we've already briefly spoken about that with the teachers, the tenure. The tenure being effectively done away with here in a few years. I foresee that having potentially a negative impact on our teachers here locally, because we are forced to select 25% of the teachers to offer a 4-year contract to, and although there is an objective means of selecting that 25%, it's based on a subjective standard, being the teacher evaluations that are done by our principals, and I think that our principals do a wonderful job with it. But any time that there is a level of subjectivity in a test, you always wonder if you have the right 25%, and unfortunately, it needs to be more than 25%. We've got some really good teachers in our system, and it's unfortunate that the legislators have put a restraint on us to keep it at 25%, only 25% that we can offer these 4-year contracts to, because I feel like in our system, knowing a lot of the teachers and knowing their roles both in and out of the classrooms, I feel like that we should be able to have the ability to offer it to more, the 4-year contract to more than 25% of our teachers.
What role do you take in creating contracts?
With our superintendent's contract, which has been an issue that in the new hire of our new superintendent, and in the past it is a complete drafting from top to bottom, putting in the vacation, the duties, the salary, the vacation, and entire drafting of the contract. That is generally only done with the superintendent's contract. Most of the time, my role is a review of the contract to make sure that we are getting what we bargained for. It's fairly common to have contracts sent over to my office for review, and in doing so, one, we want to make sure that we aren't creating a risk of liability to the board or our system, and the second thing that we try to prevent is to make sure that we haven't bargained for something that the contract doesn't provide for. We want to make sure that we get in exchange for what we pay, we get the product or the service that we want. That's the most common. It's just simple reviewing the language of the contracts. It's rare that we draft contracts from beginning to end other than the superintendent's contract.
So I'm gonna put you on the spot, since
Sure.
these contracts are a public record. I've seen news plate outlets like put them on there. You've worked with a few different superintendent contracts. What's the craziest thing you've had to put in one?
The most unusual to me, and it was something that I recently spent quite a bit of time updating myself on the legalities of, is the incentive-based superintendent contract. Our contracts in the past have been either a 1-year, 4-year contracts, and it's been cut and dry as far as what the pay would be. But with the changes in the way our systems receive money, with the grants that we receive now, you see a lot of money exchanged hands based on incentives, and our new superintendent contract has that in it, where if he reaches a certain set of goals, that each goal has a monetary value to it. And it gives him a contingent pool of money of up to $10,000, and that is something that you're seeing more, but that I hadn't seen up until recently here with our local system.
Well, that certainly sounds innovative, and I guess to editorialize it, compared to some other systems, 10,000 isn't that huge of a chunk,
Right.
but it's certainly well welcomed by anybody who would be able to meet a goal and a good incentive. Well, that's very good. Thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely.
And answering these questions, and I certainly appreciate it.